So
all
in the
stressed out.
interest of not being here all night, I'm going to go ahead and call this to order at 7:01 because like I said, I won't be here all night. And whoever pops in can pop in.
So,
Raquel,
I just want to make sure I have everybody. I see Jerry and Neil.
And that's
Doug and
me,
Kirsten.
and that's it.
Okay,
Here in the building.
gotcha.
Oh, wait, did
Thank
I
you.
unmute? I need to mute. I wasn't getting feedback, so I'm good. So we're calling the
yeah, I
meeting
think you're okay with me, but I don't hear you.
to order at 7:02. And if everyone had a chance to look over the minutes, I'll just need someone to make a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved,
That was
Second,
Jerry.
Jerry.
Okay,
Kirsten will second.
minutes have been accepted. We now turn the meeting over to Deborah Grass.
Okay, I guess the first thing I wanted to do was do some cleanup on, from our last meeting. I think I got the confirmation from everybody to go ahead and activate the survey, or at least a few of you. I just wanted to confirm that it's okay. And I have it set up, I just haven't turned it on for the weekend. Is that everyone okay with that?
Yeah, it's okay with me. I don't think I replied to you, but yes, it's okay with me.
I don't think I replied either, but it looks good.
Okay, so what I will do is I will activate it this weekend. I will send you all the link so that wherever you want to post it, you can post the link and some information about it. I will send you a final hard copy so you can make hard copies. And I didn't know if there needed to be any more discussion about how to distribute and receive the hard copies.
I seen you guys talked about it at the last meeting as well.
Yeah.
Just want to reiterate this. You said it's okay to distribute them through the school.
Can you hear Neil?
Barely, but yes.
Yeah, so Dr. Nugent is going to allow them to go home with the students from school.
So as soon as I get a hard copy, I'll take it over there to her secretary. Maybe I'll make copies.
Yeah.
They want to do it. I don't know.
The city could probably make copies for you if
Paula,
you have to talk to Paula about it, but
I'll do it. Also, the city manager gave me permission to put a box in the lobby of the city building. So we can have some deposited there. I just got to come up. I have some nice boxes. I just want to make it look home rule chartered theme, decorate the box.
I'm willing to put one at the coffee shop if you think that's appropriate too.
Yeah, why not?
Anywhere in Deer Falls is
Anywhere-
appropriate.
yeah, anywhere the public is.
Because
Would be a
we're
good
going to do one at the library also.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I talked to Rachel Christie earlier and she was just gonna make sure there wasn't an issue. I haven't heard back yet, but I'm pretty well certain we can do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can we put some copies maybe in some barber shops that a lot of people come to, like?
Ooh, Jackson's, yeah.
and, Chop shop over here.
I didn't think of that. Yeah, if they don't mind.
Yeah.
I mean-
Okay, so you guys are gonna handle the hard copies. The only thing I will need is once they're all gathered up, I'll have to enter them. Oh, Bonnie, hi, Bonnie. Hi. I'll have to, once they're all gathered together, then I'll enter them so that they become part of our total surveys collected. So, okay.
Would it be better to fax them to you or to just put them all in a big envelope?
Just put them all in a big envelope at this point, and I will be home back in the Berg around April 15th, and I can, because we're going to leave it open for at least a month.
Mhm.
And so I can run over and pick them up. It'll probably be easier than trying to fax them.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and then the other thing that we still had open from the last meeting was that Jerry was gonna do some research, and I know he has, because he sent out an email today on the age requirement for council and mayor. And I think, Jerry, you also gathered some additional information about prohibitions that you wanted to share.
Well, no, well, I went through all the home rule charters, as you can see. And for the most part, the qualifications are as I listed for each city, and pretty much that was it. But it seemed like the sections on prohibitions or reasons why you can't be an officer was a lot more detailed than it was to what would make you eligible to run for an office. I know we had some discussion last time about, for example, whether we should put in a felony would exempt you from being running for office. And quite a few of these home rule charters didn't specify felonies, but there was a lot of them that had second degree misdemeanor or higher. And then there's things like you can't serve on a municipal authority, those kind of things that I don't think we address those at all. I'm not sure if this is the time we should, but that was one of the things that just caught my eye as I was going through trying to list the qualifications.
Yeah, I'm gonna put up on the screen what we currently have so that we'll make it a little bit bigger. Can people see that this is what we currently have as prohibitions? We have that the mayor and council members shall not hold any elected or appointed city office other than the one to which he or she was elected or appointed. Shall not hold any compensated position of city employment, shall not accept gifts from any persons. Wait a minute, that's, I think it would be under qualifications. I'm sorry.
There it is, eligibility.
Yeah, there it is, eligibility. So I guess I just want to make a comment, and then maybe Bonnie might actually have shed some light too. There's a couple things that I know the older charters included, one of which was if you missed a certain number of meetings, you could be disqualified. And I think that has been ruled, I don't know if it's unconstitutional, but I know it's unenforceable.
None of that is enforceable. It's just, all you're doing is asking for litigation.
Right, and that's what we talked about last time. You can put some of those things in the charter if you so choose, but we don't believe, and Bonnie stated that they're probably not enforceable, especially when prohibitions like I said, if a lot of people have, if they've missed meetings, you can get, you can discharge them or they forfeit their office. The other one is, like Jerry said, conviction of a misdemeanor or felony or, a crime of some sort. And a lot of the older charters do have that language. I think what we're saying is included at your own risk, I guess.
So if it's not enforceable, there's no point in putting it in.
No, and the risk that you run is then you're going to end up with a lawsuit because somebody's going to say, well, it's in there, why aren't we enforcing it? And obviously I don't get a vote here, but if I did, I would be strongly, encouraging you to not put anything like that in, because you're just asking for problems down the road.
But the remaining issue that I don't think have settled yet is this age issue. Some of them, I don't have it in front of me, Jerry, but I know a lot of them had 21, some had 18. But this is council's, decision. Currently, we are showing it at 18 years of age. I think that's what council had suggested. And then Jerry was going to do his research, which he did. So.
I was going to say, only a couple of them had 21 years of old. Most of them were kind of generic, like only qualified voters can run. Well, if that's the definition, and that would include 18-year-olds, obviously. Shall be registered voter and a resident, or a registered voter can be 18, so I'm saying that the majority of these use 18 as the guideline rather than 21.
How many 18-year-olds do we know that can deal with pension issues? And
There's a lot of 40-year-olds that I know can't deal with.
said, I know
pension.
18-year-olds can definitely.
Good
How many
point.
can represent us well, being well-spoken and communicate well? How many can handle the pressure of people calling constantly with complaints? I just think 18 is too young. I really do.
Well, man,
I don't disagree, but I think I would be swayed by the idea that these are people that have to be elected. So, and as we know, even the process of getting your name on the ballot is daunting. You have to go through a bewildering array of steps. You have to get 100 people to sign a petition. I think the number of 18-year-olds who could do that would be very, very small. And then it would be up to, even if they made it that far, then it would be up to the electorate. Every once in a while, you read in the news of some, really, savvy young person who runs for office and, is elected. So I'm more comfortable leaving it with the voting age. If you can vote, you can run. But
I'm
I
100
wouldn't,
Yeah.
that's not a hill I'm gonna die on. If everybody else says 21, that's fine with me too.
So if we leave the vague wording like some of these have, must be registered voter.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
That-
I think that's what Jerry's suggesting is
Yeah.
if you have must be a registered voter, then it automatically assumes that you're 18, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And just take that out altogether.
Could we put in that you have to be a registered voter for at least 1 year?
is that the way those read, registered voter for 1 year, or just registered voter and resident for 1 year? That's the way most of them read, right, Jerry?
Yeah,
Well, Altoona has 1 year as a registered voter, Easton 1
Okay.
year as a registered voter.
Okay,
So the consensus
Yeah.
is just take number 1 out altogether and then be a registered voter for at least 1 year.
That would work.
I do have a question, maybe Bonnie can answer it. I'm not sure if there's a legal definition or
Coatesville.
not. But some state qualified voter and other state registered voter. Is there a difference?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Well, I take that back. Registered voter is you are registered to vote. Qualified voter is you would qualify, but you aren't necessarily registered.
We want the registered
Um,
people.
Yeah,
I want registered.
right.
Yeah, right, I agree.
Okay.
What,
So-
just to confuse the issue, would it by any chance mean?
Yeah.
What if you were a registered voter, but then you were convicted of a crime? Let's say you were in jail, but that doesn't make sense. They're not going to be running from jail. So I was going to say, in jail,
Never
you can't
know.
vote, right?
You never know, John.
And
Yeah.
win, run from jail and win.
Well, if
Yeah.
it's a voter, they could.
Mhm.
Well, registered voter, but that's what I'm saying. Qualified, you could be registered, but you could, the
Eligible, I mean,
The-
because I don't know. The
Yeah,
eligibility.
but this is crazy. Yeah,
I think less is more. Let's go with the less is more. Leave it
Yes.
registered.
yes.
Yeah, just to clarify, so if we take out 1, we don't have the 18 years of age, and we add be a registered voter for at least 1 year, that's actually 19, right? Because you can't register till you're
Yeah.
18, and you have to actually be a registered voter for 1 year, so we're talking 19. There, just so everyone's clear on that.
Well, a lot of these too also have that they have to be a resident, a registered voter and a resident for 1 year.
Well, we have, that's number 3, have resided in the
that's-
city for a period of 1 year prior to filing your petition.
So, but I'm looking at, they have them like as one, or did you just do it as one?
What are you talking about?
On your list, were they combined together like that in the charters, or were they separated and you just combined it for our purposes of looking at it?
The
registered and the resident.
Separate sentences.
Okay, I was just checking to see if other charters had them separated or if they were blended into one sentence.
I think it's clearer if we do them in 2 sentences.
Yeah,
So, okay, so that
Right.
kind of resolves that issue if everybody's in agreement on that.
we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, then I am going to put up our new section.
Before you do that, did we ever decide, do we want a deputy mayor? I don't think we did.
Okay, you can go back to that.
It's right above.
Yeah, let
So
me,
did we ever say yay or nay on that?
What says may select, doesn't mean you have to select.
yeah, it says the council may select a deputy mayor from among its members.
So we're gonna leave it?
Probably would now.
It would go to the chief, the financial officer, and then his spot would be replaced.
In this case, it'd be Kevin.
Mhm. Yeah.
Chair the meeting.
Yeah, the third class city code stipulates that.
Right, the accounts and finance. It would be the director in charge of accounts and finance. So that in the third class city code, that's the person that would step in. Once you have a home rule, there's no direction. So I put in here that the council may select a deputy mayor. That allows that person to preside in the absence of the mayor.
Why don't we just put in shall select?
Put in, I missed that.
Instead of may, put in shall, was Jerry's suggestion.
That's up to you guys. Do you want to put a shall in there?
Well, I think that
Yeah.
if a situation arises where you need a deputy mayor and you don't already have one appointed, that probably caused some confusion for a
Yeah.
while.
Okay,
I agree.
shall select, okay. I will change that. And then, okay, anything else on the council elected officials?
I think that was it.
Okay. All right, moving on to, let me do a new share here. Can everybody see section 3 legislation? I don't want to do what I did last time and move on without putting it on the screen. I don't want to do that. Okay, so this is the next area that I wanted to review with you. Would be the third section of the charter. Has to do with ordinances, resolutions, and motions. All real exciting stuff, right? So, so the first sentence basically just says that every action taken by council has to be done by either ordinance, resolution, or motion, that they all have to be in a written format and enacted only after reasonable notice to members of council and the public. And we kind of define that later on. This is sort of just a general statement. The one thing I did want to pose to everybody, and Bonnie, I know you have experience with this. There was language in a lot of the charters that said final action in adopting ordinances shall be by roll call vote. And that's not necessary, but it is typical of third class cities that somebody calls the roll and each of the votes is recorded. You can do it, and a lot of communities do just all in favor, aye, all opposed, no, motion passed. But this would this is similar to what's in the third class city code, where you do it by roll call vote and every vote of every member of the council is recorded in the minutes. So I wanted to pose out, I guess, sort of a question. Obviously, it's a lot faster, more convenient just to say, because most votes, I mean, let's face it, most votes are unanimous because a lot of them are routine. And then some you can ask for a roll call vote if there's,
I think it's overkill requiring them to do a roll call for every vote. I mean,
is that what you do now, though, Doug? A roll call vote?
Yes, we
Yeah,
do,
because that's the third class city code kind of.
right.
well, yeah, I mean, you can do it either way. It doesn't matter. It's just a time, it's a time saver. If it's usually, if there's any nay votes, then they do a roll call
Or someone can ask for a roll call if they
Yes.
want to have all the votes recorded. Any member of council can ask for a roll call. So, I mean, since, again, because third class city codes do it this way, I have it in here. But like Bonnie said, you can just do ayes and nays and move on, and it sometimes is easier to do that. No, it's not so bad because you're just only going to have 5 council
Right.
members, so it's not overly burdensome. So, I mean, it's up to you, all of you, what you think is the best way to handle that.
I would say keep it the way that it is. I think it does. I know it makes me just be sure that this is my position on this. By alphabetical order, I'm always the first one called. So I know for me, I'm always thinking, now, what is my answer going to be? Now, true, most of the things, I'm rarely surprised by things. We usually have talked about it. You usually have some idea. But when somebody, is in the audience, somebody from the community comes and, you've had kind of a little bit of a contentious discussion and, then to vote. So I think having each individual member and having that for only 5, because we only have 5 members, I think I'd advise we keep it that way.
And Debbie, back on, when we were going over the elected officials under voting, Article D, number 2, we, at that time, I think, agreed to use the roll call vote. So I guess it needs to be consistent.
Yes, we do. And that's, something that we would double check, but good. That's a good catch, Jerry. So in that sense, there was a roll call, and I don't have it in front of me on the screen, but you're saying that was a roll call vote?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Okay, is that everybody's kind of in agreement with that? Any other thoughts?
Good.
Okay. All right, so this first section, 3.1, has to do with ordinances. And the first thing we're going to deal with is what actions of council shall be by ordinance, so that there's no choice here whether you do it by resolution or motion. These are the things that shall be done by ordinance. And I'll go over all of them, and if anyone takes exception to anything, please feel free to stop me. But these are the typical things that are done by ordinance. So obviously adopting or amending the admin code, that's going to be part of the home rule charter. Once the home rule charter is adopted, we have to do an admin code. That has to be done by ordinance. Establishing a fine or penalty for an ordinance, for violation of an ordinance, that has to be, in my experience, that has to be done by an ordinance. Levying of new taxes or increasing to the rates of existing taxes. So this is interesting because I don't know, your Act 511 taxes, which are your earned income tax and local service tax, and this, as long as those rates stay the same, you don't have to do a new ordinance. But if you're increasing them, or if you're levying a new tax, then you would have to use an ordinance to do that. the granting, renewing, or extending of a franchise, and think you're like your cable TV franchise, that would be an ordinance. Anytime you're borrowing, because, and this is primarily because the Local Government Unit Debt Act requires an ordinance for those. These ones get to be a little bit more subjective, 6, 7, and 8. Adoption of a personnel system I have in here should be by ordinance. Establishing or abolishing any city department, office, or agency. And then creating or abolishing any commission, committee, board, or authority. And then 9 would be adopting your purchasing procurement procedure for the acquisition of goods and services, including the sale or lease of property that the city owns. So that would be by ordinance. And then obviously amending or repealing any ordinance that was previously adopted. Establishing, increasing, or reducing compensation for the elected officials, which we already set forth in section 2, that would be by ordinance. And then any other legislative acts other than those referred to above may be done by ordinance or resolution. Now, the one thing you will note, and that's why I put it down here, is I do not have the annual budget and amendments to the budget by ordinance. And I know that currently that's how it's done under the third class city code, but the other codes do it by resolution or motion. And doing it by ordinance, as you probably are well aware, makes it pretty cumbersome, because you have to advertise it, and then if you want to amend it, you have to re-advertise it, and you have to introduce it into meetings and all of that. So I specifically did not include the annual budget. I have it by resolution in the next session, but again, that's a question for the commission. I don't want to make that decision. I'm just, I know that I've run into it in other cities where adopting and amending the annual budget gets to be really cumbersome because it has to be done by ordinance. But obviously it can be done by either ordinance or resolution when you're doing a home rule charter. So I'll throw that out to the group to see if there are any thoughts.
What's the benefit of doing it by ordinance compared to the other ways?
I don't see a
There isn't
benefit
any.
to it. Yeah, I don't really see a benefit to it. It's just the way it's done in third class cities. Again, the other codes, if you're in a township or you're in a borough, they do it either by resolution or even by motion. They'll just adopt the budget by motion. But in third class cities, it requires 2 readings, and it requires an ordinance to be advertised, and it requires, like I said, any amendments would have to be re-advertised. So
I would recommend you don't do it by ordinance, because particularly with the budget, there's already provisions in there about how many times you have to advertise it, and that, and then with an ordinance, if you advertise the ordinance and then you decide to make some significant changes to the budget, you got to start all
right,
from square one again.
right.
And you have, usually the budget, you're scrambling to get it done by the end of the year. So why make it harder
Yeah.
than it has
Well,
to be, would be my thought.
Can I just say though, like as a person that's not involved in the passing of these budgets, but a person that is affected by the passing of these budgets, it seems to me that if you want transparency in government and you want participatory government, that, I mean, I understand that it causes headaches, but I also understand that if you want people to feel like they have a voice, and if they have, some sort of input at all into this, that I think the ordinance and the advertisements and everything are actually kind of critical for that.
Yeah, I think that's
I
a
mean,
good
I could be
point.
wrong.
I think that's a good point, Kirsten. But when we get to the, there's gonna be a whole section on finance that includes the budget process. And we can add things there, like having at least one workshop, publishing, it in a newspaper or on the website. We could actually add transparency that you don't have even now. You don't have those requirements now, but you can actually
Right.
add that to the budget process when we get to that. I'm just not sure it needs to be by, I guess I just don't know that we want to put in the charter that it has to be done by ordinance. It's up, again, whatever you guys think is best. And I know you're used to doing it by ordinance, so that's why I raised
Well,
the question.
Sure. Just for, full and complete transparency on my part, what we hear all the time is that the city does things behind closed doors and pushes things through. And so to me, I don't want to put encumbrances on people that are, on these things, but I do feel like perhaps if that would be a point of contention for people that are looking to nitpick, or that are concerned that, that the city is doing things without the input of citizens, that we would just say, okay, well, we're going to push these things through without any sort of citizen hearing opportunity. That's all.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know what do others think.
In my limited experience, so I've only been 8 years on council and a year before that appointed to council, so 9 years. The shift it's always been a hassle right there in December to do the necessary announcements and meetings to abide by the ordinance thing. And we've never had members of the public coming in and raising questions about the budget at that point. So again, it's not the hill I would die on, but I think I would be more interested in Debbie's ideas about transparency, where you're making a better effort that the community could see the budget than to do the ordinance where you have to have the second reading and it's true, amendments, we've been in that position, a third of the time I'd say that we're doing the budget where people are scrambling around to get the notices in the newspaper and all that, and never with members of the community coming in and asking, where was the notice or anything like that.
Debbie, you're saying the ordinances only need one reading, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to go down and we're going to talk about the actual procedure for adopting the ordinance. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that makes ordinances really cumbersome in third-class cities. And it's only in third-class cities, and that is that you have to have 2 readings before you can adopt. So I want to visit that also, because there's no other, again, boroughs, townships of the first class, second class, there's no other place where you actually have to do 2 readings before
They
you
don't
can
even
adopt.
require 1 reading.
No.
I mean, that's just, get
Yeah.
rid of it.
I do think though that, I think Kirsten raises a really good point about transparency. And like I said, I do think I think I'm going to leave this question in here for now so that we can revisit it. Because I think once we talk about the budget process, there may be better ways to get that transparency that we want, because nobody reads the legal ads. I mean, if it's an ordinance and that's the only, it's going to say we have to put it in the legal ads. Nobody reads that anyway. But I do think that having a, requiring at least one budget workshop, requiring the budget to start earlier, requiring, you know, that it's on the website. I mean, we can do stuff like that, that is not in the third class city code, but we can do that. And I think that might be a better approach. Whatever you.
I think you're spot on, Debbie. And my concern is not necessarily that procedure is the right one, but if we take it away completely, then what it's going to raise red flags, I think, for people. So if we don't necessarily, like, if we don't take it away without giving some sort of a replacement or an opportunity for people to have,
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
opinions or you know, to air their thoughts about it, then I think we might just experience some pushback about that. And I think that's fine. I mean, I would push back on that too. So
yeah. And I
like
I
the-
said,
I
I
like the
think
tone.
I'll leave the question there so that we remember to revisit that particular issue. Were there any other of these that anyone has any issue with or wants clarification of? Or Bonnie, I don't know if you have any thoughts about any of the other things, but these are pretty standard when you create a department or a committee commission, when you adopt a purchasing procedure, things like that. It's pretty standard to require an ordinance for doing that stuff.
Yeah, the one I questioned was the franchise. I mean, normally you just adopt a contract by motion. Do you really want to have to do that by ordinance?
Well, it wouldn't be any contract. It would just be if there was a if you were granting a franchise.
Well, it's technically when you do the contract with them, isn't that you're granting them the franchise for that period of time? I mean, that's how I always understood it.
You mean like for cable TV?
Yeah, but yeah, that's really the only thing I could think of would be when you do your cable, you're technically by contract granting them a franchise. I mean, somebody could interpret it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that you want to be bothered having to do an ordinance for that, but
Well, not for a regular contractor agreement, but if you're doing a this was in a lot of the charters, but we can revisit that too and maybe do a little.
whatever, that's just my thoughts. I like less is more, keep it streamlined. Why spend all this money on advertising that nobody looks at, but you have to do it? And I don't know.
Yeah.
It just
Okay.
gets to be a bit of administrative overkill sometimes.
Okay.
And no real benefit from it.
Anything else from anyone that sees any issues with any of these other 12 requirements? Okay, then I'm going to move on to, this is another area where, and Bonnie's probably right, less is more. I tried to streamline this. This would be special circumstances that would require a public hearing. So in addition to passing the ordinance, these 4 things would also require a public hearing at least 10 days prior to the notice. So the only ones I have here are that there are certain things by state law or federal law that require a public hearing. For instance, under the municipalities planning code, if you're going to do a zoning ordinance, it does require, or an amendment to a zoning ordinance, you have to do a public hearing. So there are certain requirements by state or federal law. The second one is the adoption or amendment to the admin code. And this is pretty typical because the admin code, remember, is going to be pursuant to the Home Rule Charter, and it's going to outline all your departments, all your procedures, all your, it's going to have a lot in it. And so typically you do have a public hearing right before you adopt the admin code. And then the only other ones, again, these have to do with the Home Rule Charter. Anything that is proposed under the initiative power of the charter or under the referendum power of the charter. So these would be the only things that would actually require a public hearing. And remember that a public hearing, the council can have a hearing on anything at any time for any reason. This is when a public hearing is actually it's a more a legal term where you have to give notice and you have to, have a formal public hearing to take public comment. So beyond this, like I said, the council can really have public hearings whenever they want. But in these 4 cases, you would be required to have a public hearing. Any thoughts? Okay. Think about it. If you have any issues, we can discuss. This is just the enacting clause. The city of Beaver Falls hereby ordains. That's how we, the enacting clause of the ordinance. Every ordinance shall contain the date of its enactment in the municipal seal. This is, I think, important. Failure on the part of the mayor and city manager, city clerk to sign an ordinance or affix the municipal seal shall not in any way invalidate an otherwise valid ordinance. So let's just say if you have, an ordinance and the mayor disagrees with it or votes against it, just because the mayor doesn't sign it doesn't mean that the valid ordinance isn't, it's still a valid ordinance because it's been adopted, advertised and passed by council. So it basically, just because someone refuses to sign it doesn't mean that it's not a valid ordinance. And then here's the procedure. I tried to simplify it, but Bonnie, if you have thoughts about simplifying it even further, I'm all for it. So typically they're prepared by the city manager in conjunction with the solicitor. They'll provide it to council in advance of the meetings for consideration. We put this little number 1 that they have to be distributed to the mayor and council and filed in the city manager's office for public inspection. So you're not going to blindside someone or a council member or anyone by not having them have a copy of the ordinance when you're ready to adopt it. Every ordinance has to be introduced at a public meeting in writing and in the form where it's ready for final adoption. So you can't have an ordinance be introduced and adopted at a public meeting if you got to fill in the blanks that are not filled in. It has to be ready for adoption when you bring it to the meeting. Public notice of all proposed ordinances shall be, we have published as required by state law. So I think, Bonnie, you can confirm this. The language in most of the codes is it shall be in a newspaper of general circulation, but the state's always talking about reforming that to allow it to be published either in a local paper or, on the website.
Yeah, there's really push to just allow it to be looked at your website, where people will see, or some other social media, like a lot of municipalities have Facebook pages, whatever.
So that's why we didn't use that language here. We made it more generic in a sense, because if the state passes, if they change the law, then you can do it without changing your charter. Because if we put a newspaper of general circulation, you're kind of stuck with that. So that's why it's that way. We will make reference, you'll see throughout some of the ordinances that there's a city's official information site. For most cities, most municipalities, that's the website. But we didn't want to, again, use that word because that locks you into the website. And who knows what it'll be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So we just put that it's available on the city's official information site, whatever that may be, and not less than 7 days before passage. So what this allows you to do, this language, is prepare an ordinance, get it into its final form, distribute it to council put the notices in place wherever they may be, and then council can adopt it at their public meeting. So it takes away that first reading, second reading that you're stuck with right now. You can actually formalize the ordinance, publicize it, distribute it, and then go to a meeting and adopt it. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
Okay. The discussion, obviously, on any proposed ordinance has to be at a public meeting. You can't, have emails going back and forth or sit behind a closed door and discuss your ordinances. The ordinance discussion needs to be in public. And amendments to the ordinance can be made on the floor with a roll call vote. So you can amend it at the table.
Wait, I'm sorry, Deb, on that last one. Should we put in something with the exception of executive session?
Well, if it's an
discussion?
ordinance, it has to be done in public.
But some of those things you're requiring by ordinance, could entail a contract, which you would want to be able to have some private discussion potentially.
Yeah, I don't think
Or
this
personnel.
excludes the discussion, but it says that the ordinance has to be done in public. You can't adopt an ordinance in executive session.
No, but that's not what this says. It says shall discuss. It doesn't say shall adopt the proposed ordinance.
Okay,
I mean, I think you could clarify it by either saying, change that to adopt, or leave it the way it is and say with the exception of appropriate executive session discussion. I could just see somebody saying, wait, we shouldn't be talking about this, but in fact, they should be.
how's that? The council shall adopt all ordinances at a public meeting after public notice.
Yes,
And then amendments can be made on the floor. Is that better?
yeah.
This gives the city solicitor the decision or determination when there's substantial amendments. So if there are substantial amendments at the table and to the proposed ordinance, then the solicitor can rule on whether it has to be re-advertised. So basically, if you're making, if you're totally rewriting it, obviously the solicitor is going to say, no, you need to table this and re-advertise it. If you're just cleaning up some grammar issue or, something that's not substantial, the solicitor will make that determination. 6 is pretty typical. If there's maps, plans, or drawings of any kind that are part of the ordinance, they have to be filed with the ordinance. 7 is when the ordinance is adopted by council. It's then signed by the mayor within 10 days of the affirmative majority vote, or in his or her absence, or refusal to sign, the deputy mayor or any other council member, as long as it is attested by the city manager or city clerk. And you're going to notice we didn't get to this yet. I have city manager / city clerk because eventually we'll have to talk about whether those are 2 separate positions or if they can be combined or how we want to handle those 2 positions. So for now, I just have that either the city manager or city clerk can attest those documents. Now this one, Bonnie, I don't know if we need. The adopted ordinance must be signed by the solicitors, approved to form. No. Anyone care about that? I'll take it out if we don't need it.
I mean, nobody does that.
Okay. Anyone care if this is in there or not?
Oh,
Okay. Get rid of that. I didn't want to put any specific numbers in here. We just have that the penalty for the violation of any ordinance shall not exceed the maximum fine established by the Commonwealth. And any ordinance may provide that for continuing violations, each day that a violation exists may be regarded as a separate offense, which helps you to accumulate your fines and penalties if the person doesn't comply, or the property owner doesn't comply. We're saying that for most ordinances, they're effective 10 days after the ordinance is signed, unless the ordinance actually specifies a date. So that way you don't have to remember. They're automatically effective 10 days after they're signed. Unless you have one that says sign, immediately, that it's effective immediately, or it's effective 30 days from now. You can have an effective date in it, but if you don't, it's automatically effective 10 days later. This is something we should probably talk about. So currently in the third class city code requires this, that all ordinances be kept in an official ordinance book that's bound and in the custody of the city clerk. What we are saying here is, because the more modern way to take care of that is to still keep a copy of the original ordinance, but in lieu of an ordinance book, the city may codify all its ordinances and have a codified ordinance instead of keeping the, historical ordinance books. And I think that's a better, more.
And I could even see us getting to a point where it goes, where it's all electronic.
Right.
So
Well, yeah.
I would take
exactly.
that out. And maybe just have, that they have to have some type of.
It's bad.
Well, the codifications are all cloud-based now.
Right.
They're all cloud-based. So when you codify them, they are all web-based.
Yeah, I would rather even have you put it in there that they have to have it codified.
I have that in lieu of an ordinance. Book.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes.
City may codify all adopted ordinances within 6 months of the effective date of the ordinance. So that would be the city manager or city clerk. Once an ordinance is adopted, would send it in, and it would become part of your codification that's available online. And actually, I have to talk to Mick about that, but I think we may have this codification as part of our grant that we just got. I can't remember what's in that grant, but there might be an online codification in that grant.
I think you're right.
I'm kind of thinking there is, yeah. So that'll be helpful because there's funds to do this, to codify the ordinances.
Can we change that from may codify to shall codify?
Shall
Yeah.
change this from may to shall?
Yeah.
Okay. And I hear it thundering and lightning here. So if you lose me, that's because my power went off. I don't know.
It's raining pretty bad here too.
Is it really?
Yeah. Florida.
This codes of technical regulation, this means that you can adopt any standard code of technical regulation. So think building codes, fire codes, things like that. You can adopt any of those by reference as long as you have them available at the city building. And again, these are mostly digital now and available online. So you don't even have hard copy books. Rarely do cities have hard copies anymore. They're mostly online. But so you can adopt those by reference. And then these emergency ordinances, basically this gives you the ability to declare an emergency ordinance on condition that it affects life, health, property, or public peace. And then you can discard some of those regulations, but you still have to do this at a public meeting. You still have to adopt the ordinance at a public meeting. You may be able to, not advertise or get it done pretty quickly, but you do have to label it and designate it as an emergency ordinance and declare that an emergency exists. And then you can repeal that at any time thereafter. So that's the procedure. Any discussion, comments? Things that we need to discuss further?
I'm interested to hear from Doug if there's anything different or that would change anything in a positive or negative way for you.
No, I mean, it's, wow, why are we getting all the echo?
I don't know.
It's pretty much the way we act now. And I would be very, very pleased if we could get codification so that that's the way that people can see what the ordinances are, and that you can go back and quickly find various ordinances. I think that would be a tremendous advancement for the city.
Thank you.
Okay, let's
I had mute. Okay.
talk briefly about resolutions.
Mary had a question.
Sure.
Does the third class code require qualification?
No, the third class city code actually requires that you keep the ordinances in these big bound ordinance books. You've probably seen them at the city building. What a codification does is basically take all those ordinances, put them in sections, and makes them available online for everyone. So that's kind of what we're working on with the city, is to get that codification in place. Now, I don't think they even, when they wrote the codes, I'm not sure they envisioned the ability to codify, this stuff. So resolutions are a much less formal way for the council to take action, much less formal than ordinances, but still, they're still retained in, right now, in resolution books. So the two less formal actions are resolutions, and then motions are just recorded in the minutes. So, if you make a motion to adjourn, it's recorded in the minutes. A resolution is a little more formal than that. So what I have here for resolutions and motions is approval. This is Bonnie, what you were talking about, approval of agreements and contracts, approval of collective bargaining agreements, establishment of annual salaries, benefits, and compensation. And this one, and I guess Doug may know the answer to this. This is currently done by ordinance too, is it not? The annual salary ordinance?
Yes.
So we're saying here that can be done by resolution. So again, that's a change. I guess I should highlight that because that's a change from the third class city code. Establishment of fees for services. Now this obviously doesn't include fines and penalties and those things, but this is a fee for your services. So building fees, building permits, charges for copies, things like that. This allows you to do this by either motion or resolution. Now here I have adoption of the annual budget and amendments to the budget. but we have that as still as a question mark in the section above. Adoption of the annual capital improvement plan, which we don't have or do right now, but we're gonna make that a requirement later on in the charter, is that the city does a capital improvement plan. Or at least I'm gonna suggest that you have that later on in the charter. Appointments to boards, commissions, committees, authorities, or similar agencies. Again, that can be done under this charter, would be able to be done by either resolution or motion. And then all other legislative.
Only exception to that would be like the NPC appointment, the municipalities code appointments, the planning and zoning board. 'Cause
Those can be
that's-
done by motion
no,
or resolution.
They have to be done by resolution, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, this is by resolution.
Or motion. So I just want, so there are some things that are accepted under the Home Rule Charter Act that might require you to do it by resolution.
So should I take out the motion off of this?
No, I think that's fine. I guess you just always have to go back to the preceding rule that if the Home Rule Charter or Marshall Plans Law doesn't allow you to do it, you know, just so your solicitor might be telling you at some point down the road, wait, you can't do that.
Okay.
But I think it's fine. I would change it.
Okay. And then other legislative actions of council. Again, this sort of follows the ordinance piece. The City of Beaver Falls hereby resolves as follows. This too has to be dated, the date of enactment, signatures, seal, similar to the ordinances. And then here we did the same thing that we did with the ordinances. We gave the city the ability, in lieu of a resolution book, the city may provide electronic access to a catalog version of all adopted resolutions. So this is basically the ability to digitize everything so that it's searchable and again, available online in lieu of actually keeping this resolution book. And I wouldn't make this shall, because this is a little bit more of a project and may or may not get done by the city. I would just leave this, that the city may look at that as an option, this electronic access. And that's everything related to, probably more than you ever wanted to know about ordinances and resolutions. Any thoughts?
For the minutes, would you give me a really good definition of a resolution? Something I can put in there for the public to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess, like I said, I don't know, Bonnie, you can jump in here. A resolution it's a legislative action that's less formal than an ordinance and doesn't have the weight of law behind it. Is that?
Yeah, that's a good summation. And you don't have to advertise them.
Right.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank
It's
you.
a little more formal than a motion, like I said, because it is recorded, it is signed, it is sealed, but it's not, doesn't have the weight of law that an ordinance has. And you can't, for instance, you could not pass a resolution and then assign penalties and fines for it. You would have to do that by ordinance.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
So anything else? Anybody have any thoughts? So I'm going to, as we get these sections completed, I'm gonna put them into the template. Eventually, we'll have a charter, which will be wonderful.
Mhm.
So the next thing that I want to address, and I won't keep you much longer, we're at 8:05, but I did want to talk just briefly about the next section. Is going to focus on, we already focused on elected positions. I would like to focus on city manager. Let's see my little chart here. City manager, city solicitor, city clerk. Those are the appointed positions. Oh, and the chief finance officer. So I guess the question I would pose to you before we start drafting this is, should all of those positions be in the charter? So what I'm saying is that those positions, if they're in the charter, must be filled. So if we put a chief finance officer position and we say the council shall appoint a chief finance officer, then it's in the charter. It's obviously it's codified. It becomes part of, the city's structure. So those are the 4 positions. My thoughts are that we want to address: city manager, city solicitor, city clerk, and chief finance officer. So I guess I want to hear the commission's thoughts about whether all 4 of those positions should be included in the charter so that we can start drafting what that would look like.
The one that I would, I don't want to say tonight, I'm prepared to say one way or the other, but the one I think we ought to think about, I'm totally committed, obviously, to city manager. You need that. You absolutely need a solicitor to wade through the legal issues and keep you on track that way. And we're bound and determined to put a chief financial officer in here. So that's good. The one would be city clerk, and we have a fabulous city clerk in Paula. So this has nothing to do with Paula or anything like that, but it seems to me that really what that person is a administrative person for the city manager. And so it seems to me that it would be best that the city manager would make the decision about who and how much staff that he or she wants and needs, as opposed to saying there has to be this administrative staff position in place. So that's the one I would give some. Is there a lot of information in the 3rd class city code that delineates that the city clerk must do this XYZ thing? Is there a lot of that, Debbie?
Yeah, the two things that I recall, and I don't have the 3rd class city code in front of me, but we can definitely research that. But the 2 things I think that are important to remember are, one, that the city clerk is appointed by council, and so really technically reports to council. And I know in practical operation, Paula works with Mick, and Paula's been amazing. I've known Paula for probably 20 years. And then the other thing that the code specifically assigns to the city clerk is the keeper of the records. So the ordinances, the resolutions, the minutes, and to countersign and attest documents and contracts. So those are the things that are specifically assigned to the city clerk, but we all know that she does so much more than just that. So
right. I guess even hearing that, I mean, I know she takes care of the minutes and all that sort of stuff, but and the way that it works now is is great. Mick has changed Paula's role in the work of the city by bringing her in to meetings and decision making, which is great. And I think that's opened my eyes to that's the way it ought to be. The city manager is choosing who he wants to come in and help. It seems to me the other way, if you say to the city council, you get to appoint the city clerk and you get to appoint the city manager, that you could potentially set up two competitors, you know, back and forth that wouldn't be good for the city. But I'd like to think about it a little bit more. But that's the only one I would question.
Any other thoughts about those positions? Because like I said, we want to, between now and your next meeting, we'll draft some language around those positions, because that should be that'll be the next thing we should kind of tackle here. Are there any other positions that need to be included that we haven't addressed? And, you know, obviously we didn't get to specific departments and things like that, but, you know, we have, I think, let me just confirm this. We have eliminated the city treasurer and the city controller by saying in the first elected officers, section 2, that the only elected positions will be mayor and council. So we have effectively eliminated city treasurer and city controller. And that's, everybody's on board with that. Okay. Okay, that's all I really had for tonight, unless anyone has any other thoughts or things that they would like us to take a look at that we haven't.
I guess the silence means everybody's good.
Everybody's good.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So go for it, Doug. Hurry up.
I move we adjourn.
Neil,
Second.
Neil second.
Neil, second.
Yep. Okay, good work. Thank you so much, Deborah and
Thank you
Bonnie.
for all of you.
Your
Thanks,
input
Debbie.
is very valuable.
It's
Yep.
great.